Welcome to the studio review for SQL Part 2. This one is about a library where you have a database that will store books, authors, patrons, reference books, genres, and loan records. And we have been given the queries that we need in order to create all these tables. They also have given us the files that we need to fill some of these tables, the authors, books, genres, and patrons. So we'll be making use of those. And then essentially, once we have each of these tables set up with all of their different columns, we're going to work on writing some queries that are going to not only be able to look up data, but also manipulate it. All of the values that need to be changed in order to loan out a book, and, new record created in the loan table. And when you check a book back in, updating all of the records pertaining to that in different tables. And then we'll do a couple last queries here, and then do a couple of bonus missions, and that should round it out. So let's start. I'm going to open up my server here, and I'm going to create a new schema called library. Hit apply, and close. Okay, and we look over here and we see library, and the next thing I need to do is double click on it because I want to make sure this is going to be the database that the queries are going to be run against. And we don't have any tables yet because we haven't created them. All right, so I'm going to open up the create tables file that I created that has all of these queries copied over for each of these, and then instructions on kind of how we're going to go about importing the records that will have the data that will fill these tables as we're creating them. And then I have an additional file that I can open here for starter code that's going to help us with the second part after we create all the tables, going through and writing all the queries we need to write. And we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to close this. Okay. So the first thing they tell us to do is to create a book table. They give us the query and tell us that after we create it, we should add the books.csv file. So I can go ahead and click anywhere in here and hit the button here that has the cursor on it to create that table. And I don't see my, there we go. All right, and we have success. So if I go now over here to the schemas panel and hit this refresh button, now we see that the book table exists. I can open up a tab here and see that it has all the columns that we expected it to, as we see in the instructions: book ID, author ID, title, ISBN, available, and genre ID. So the columns are ready to receive the data. So now we can come over here to the name of the table here, just right click and say table data import wizard, and then go to browse. And then we're going to find the books.csv file and say next. And we're just going to use the existing table library.book. This is the one that, we right clicked on. So it automatically assumes that's the one you want. And then we can just double check to make sure that all of the columns match up. So title, author ID, because this data is coming from this CSV file that is using all of these titles. And it looks like every one of them match exactly, but we've got the right ones with the right ones. That's what really matters. And they're giving you a little bit of a preview here. So we can hit next and then next. And it says, success, 35 records imported. So I can say finish here, and then I can hit the blue refresh button here, and boom, there's all of our data. So that's a very easy way if you have existing data and you know that you can match up the columns to be able to get data into your database. Okay, so that was the first one. Let's keep going. We need to do the author table. I'm going to click in here, hit this button, refresh over here, and now open this one up in a tab so we can view its contents. And then I'll right click here, table data import wizard, and do the exact same thing, but I need to change which file it is we're importing from. So I'm going to get the authors.csv file, and first name, last name, birthday, and death day are all lined up properly. I'm going to go ahead and continue through, and then it says 18 records imported. Great. Okay. So now we need to do patron. This is the same process. I'm going to first create the table by running this query. Looks like that was successful. So I'll refresh over here, and there it is. I'll create a new tab so we can view the contents in a second. And then I'm going to right click, table data import wizard, go get the patrons.csv file, and then click through. Oops, let's go back and double check. Yeah, first name, last name, loan ID. There we go. Looks good. All right. 46 records imported. So we have 46 patrons to choose from. All right, so that's the first three. We've got all of that. So now we want to create this table for reference books. It's going to just keep track of books that are references. It's going to use a foreign key to relate to the book table. And we're just going to go ahead and create this first so that it exists, but we don't have data we want to fill this. We're going to actually use a query, insert into, and they give us this, all of this is directly from here. They just say use these, they give them to us. So it just says insert into reference books. It gives us the columns that we're supposed to be matching, and we're saying we're going for 5 is the edition and 32 is the book ID, which is how it ties in to, book 32, which over here we can see is organic chemistry. And so that's, we can run this one to go ahead and make sure that's been set. And then let's go refresh this and take a look at this table. And there it is, reference ID 1, edition 5, book ID 32. All right. 2 more. So we're going to create a genre table. This one is one of the ones that's going to have data for us. And there it is. And I'll right click and say import wizard, switch to using the genres file, and then go right on through genre ID. Now this is interesting because you'll notice that the source columns in the CSV file say genre ID and genre type. But what our query said, and this is what got set up down here, you can see it, is genre ID and genres, plural. And I'm not sure why LaunchCode chose to name it genres, but they did. It really is just, the name of the genre. So, but you'll notice that as long as they're matched up, it will transfer the data to the right column, so we don't have a problem. But the names are different on that one. All right, 26 records imported. We have 26 genres. So I can refresh. Oh, no, I don't need to refresh. It's already here. I can refresh here. There we go. Yeah, now we can see all of our different genres for books. And you'll notice that 25 is the reference genre, and that is exactly what if we go to the books, it's exactly what this genre ID is over here. So it's 25. Okay, last one, the loan table. So this table exists to hold records that are only created whenever a patron actually decides to check out a book. So we'll create one of these to add to this table every single time. So we don't have any data we're going to put it in right away. We just need to create the table so that it can receive data. So I'm going to come back over here and run this last query and refresh over here. And there it is. We can open it up and see that it's empty, and it's waiting for us. And when we write the scripts that are going to handle this, we'll be able to have it create a loan ID for us, which it'll do automatically. We've got auto increment in here, but we'll associate a patron ID, a book ID. We'll use today's date to set the date out. And then later when we run a script to check the book back in, it'll update this from null to whatever the date is at that time. So those are some of the scripts we're going to be writing to handle this whole process of checking a book out and checking it back in. And those records will be held in this table whenever that happens. All right. So that's it for the setup. Now we can get on to the main part of the assignment, which is to do all of these queries. So the first thing I want us to do here is to return. And by the way, this could, in case this throws you off, when they say return here, they're talking about going and looking up the data. They're not talking about like returning a book, like you're checking a book back in. We'll get to that down here. This just says, return the mystery book titles in their ISBN to go look it up. So this is easy. We know how to do this. This is something we learned about in the last class. It's as simple as doing a select title and ISBN from book and specifying that we want the genre ID to be whatever the genre ID is of mysteries. So we can go over to our genre table and see that mysteries are ID 6. So we'll go back to our query and just say, wherever the genre ID is 6, that's what we want to retrieve. Okay, let's run this. And there we go. We have a short list of 8 books and their ISBN numbers that are all mysteries. All right, one down. Next one, return all of the titles and authors' first and last names for books that are written by the authors that are currently living. Now, when you're evaluating how the heck you're going to write this query, the first thing you have to pay attention to is what data are they asking you for to produce as columns in the table, and then also what data do they need in order to have conditions on which to narrow it down and filter. So the things that they want us to retrieve are titles and the author's first and last names. Titles are going to come from the book table. The author's first and last names are going to come from the author table. So that tells us immediately we're going to need to pull together 2 different tables to get this data. That means we're going to need a join. But then we're also going to need to filter because they only want it for the authors that are currently living. And the only way we can tell that is from the author's, author has a birthday and a death day. So we can basically say if the death day is null, then that means, and I can refresh this, yeah. If the death day is null, then that means they're still alive. If it has a date, then that means that they're, dead. So we can use that to help us, narrow it down. So let's start by, and we'll just start, it doesn't really matter which table you put first, you just choose one. I'm going to start with the book one since the first thing we're going to pull out is the title. And I'm going to say select book.title. I'm going to go ahead and use the dot notation, even if we don't need to, just to make it really clear for you which table the stuff is coming from. Book.title, that's obviously coming from the book table. And then the first and last name are coming from author. And then we say from book and then inner join on author. So this is where we join together just the things that these 2 tables have in common based on author ID from book equaling the author ID from author. And then, of course, we said we're not done because we also want to narrow down to make sure it's only the people that are living. So we need a where condition here and say author.death day. And then we just say is null, just like that, which is a perfectly, valid value because it always defaults to making any value null if you don't provide it with something other specific. Okay, so let's run this and let's see if we get the list we're expecting to get. Yeah, there we go. So we have all of the titles with the authors that are alive. And that's all there is to that. So a couple of good warm-up ones that really don't involve anything that you didn't already know from the previous class. Now, that is not going to be the case for the things we're going to do down here. We're going to start needing to, do some things that are more complex. The first thing I want to talk about, as we get into this idea of writing something to accomplish loaning out a book, is that we're writing a script, and they say that, but a script, if you don't know what that means, it essentially means you have a series of queries that you're going to be writing that all need to, follow in sequence to accomplish the entire thing, because you may have to make multiple changes or lookups with multiple tables. And sometimes it's not about joins, it's about, go to this table and change this piece of data. Now go to this table and change this piece of data. And so you have several things you need to do in a row. So I've kind of marked this out with these dashed lines to make it clear that this entire section is going to be dedicated to writing a series of queries, that are together are a script. And anytime we run them, we're going to run all of them together. Now they tell us we can, pick out any patron in book. So we'll get to that. I also have a note here to use variables. I'm going to write it first without the variables, just so you can see the difference. Because you probably didn't write it that way if you've done this already. But then I'm going to show you what it looks like to use variables to make it easy for yourself to execute the script for other patrons and books without having to change those values in a lot of different places. So let's start here with, it says your script is going to change available to false for the appropriate book. And remember, in MySQL, there is no false. There's only 0 and 1. So we'll be setting it to 0. Then we need to create a new loan record using today's date as the date out. Use the patron ID and book ID that match. And then we need to update the patron so that they have the loan ID associated with their record. That is that new record we created in the loan table. So we're going to need to have several steps here. This is why we're writing a script. All right, so changing available to false for the book is relatively straightforward. We basically just want to do the update keyword and say update the book table and set available to 0. Where, because you need to be very specific about which record it is, where book ID equals, and this is where we choose an ID. So if we go over to book and look, there's so many. Let's just choose 30. We could go all the way up to 35. So let's come back here and we'll just say book ID is 30. So we can do that. Now I'm not going to run anything until we get done here. I'm going to make, because we want to run everything together. All right, now we want to add a record to the loan table. So this is where we say insert into, and we say we want loan, and specifically because it's auto incrementing the ID, we're not giving it an ID. So we need to specify the rest of the columns. So we're going to say date out, and actually not even all of the columns, because if you remember, the loan table has a date in, but we're going to leave that null. So the only ones we need to specify are the patron ID, the date out, and the book ID. So let's come over here and finish putting this in. I'm going to say patron ID and book ID. And now that I've named these, I just need to provide the data in the same order. So I say values. And then for date out, there is actually a built-in way to get the current date. You just say current underscore date with parentheses, and it will go get them. But after that, I need to have a comma so that I can put in my other two values. So let's say we're going to do this for patron number 17. Why not? And then for the book ID, we need to make it match. So it's going to be book ID 30. And you can start to see already why it might be helpful to have variables, right? So that'll update, that'll create this new loan record that associates the patron and the book that they're borrowing along with the date that it's leaving the library. So the last thing to do is to update the patron's record with that loan ID. So we have a way to relate it to them. So if we go to the table, you can see that they're going to have, one loan ID at any given point in time that'll be associated with their own record. So to write that, we're going to say update patron, because now we're updating a third table. And we want to set the loan ID to be equal to whatever the loan ID was that was just created. And you say, well, how are we supposed to figure that out? Well, we're going to need to do another query. And this is a subquery. This is where we use a query to get information. And I'm going to set it up like this so we can kind of, do it in as many lines as we want to here. And yeah, I'll leave it like that. So we need to go look up the loan ID so we can set this value. And I'm going to say select loan ID from loan. So we're going to go to the loan table, look at the loan ID, and we're going to find it by checking first the patron ID. Does the patron ID equal 17? And does the date out equal the current date? And that's a great way to tell, that's one way to tell it whether this is actually the correct loan ID. Because if you think about it, you could have a patron coming and going and having different loan records over time. We need to make sure that it isn't just the right patron, but it's also the one that has the current date. Another way to do this would be maybe to just look and say which one has a date in of null. But that also just assumes that they don't have, that they don't have more than one out at a time, which we're going to have to make that assumption. But yeah, this should do it. So that's the end of that particular query. Now, when you do a subquery, you don't use a semicolon here because that would end the entire thing. So we need to wait. And we're also not going to put it here because we still have one more condition. We want to update patron. We may have specified a patron ID here when we were going to the loan table to look that up. But now we need to make sure that we're specifying the right patron for the update to the patron table. So we need another where and then say patron ID equals 17. So again, you can start to see why variables are going to be helpful for us, because every time we want to check out another book for another patron, we're going to have to change all these in multiple places. But let's just run it and make sure it works. So we're going to, I'm going to select all three of these like this, and then use the first icon up here to run just the part that's selected. And it successfully went through. So let's go check the loan table and refresh it. And there we have it. Loan ID number 1, patron ID 17, book ID 30, and today's date as the date out. And then of course, date in stays null because we didn't specify anything for that. And that's exactly what we want. We don't want that to be set until it actually does come back. Okay, so we can check the patron and refresh this for all of the patrons and go to patron 17 and notice that she currently has a loan ID of 1. And then, of course, you might say, well, shouldn't we have it associated somehow with the book table? You wouldn't need to put anything on the book table directly. In this case, we actually just have access. We have the relationship just because the book ID is stored in this table. So that's going to be enough for us to be able to connect all of the dots for future stuff. So again, if I wanted to do this differently now, I could say, okay, what about, book 5? What if patron, I did say, yeah, book, yeah. Let's change book 5 here. And then what if we give that to patron like 40 or something? So we can run this again, but we have to change this in all these different places. And then I have to highlight the whole thing and run it. And now we go over here and refresh this table, and we can see that loan ID number 2 has patron 40 checking out book 5. Okay, so let's talk about variables. This is something that I am covering in lecture, but depending on who your primary instructor is, you may not know about this, so I'm going to explain it. Basically, you can just use the set keyword anytime you want to create a variable, and then you just use the @ symbol with the name of the variable, and I'm going to call it book loaned, and set it to some value. We'll say 31 this time for the book. And then I also want to set the patron so I can use that multiple times. So let's go ahead and just use a comma and say @ patron, and we'll set that to 42. Okay, that's the whole query. We're just setting those values in those. So what we need to do now is to copy these and drop them in where these numbers are. So everywhere there's a book ID, we want to drop in this and this here to correspond with the book ID. And then everywhere there's a patron, we're going to drop in the patron ID here, here, and here. So 3 different places that's needed. And look at that. Now, every time we want to update the loan table and create a new record, we only have to change these in one place and everything else will flow out of it. So let's test it out. We've got some new values in here now. But here's the kicker. You can't just run this because these don't get set unless they get run as well. So make sure you include the variable being set so that it actually is using those values when it proceeds to go through the sequence of the rest of these queries. All right. We'll go over here to the loan table, refresh again, and there it is. Patron 42 has checked out book 31. All right. So we can do a couple more of these. Let's say the book is 1 and the patron is 22. And I'll select them and run them again. And let's do one more. Let's say patient book 16 and patron 33. How's that? Run it again. All right, now let's go over and update this. Yeah, now we've got a couple more. And that's good. We've got some books that are checked out. So the next thing to do is, of course, is to write another script that's going to help us check the book back in. So they tell us over here that we need to be able to change available to true because, right now, if I update these, you can see that for all of the books that were checked out here, these are zeros, right? They're not available. This one's not available. These 2 aren't available. We need to be able to change those back. And so we're going to need to do that. And then also update the loan table with, find the correct loan ID and the correct record, and then give it a date in. And then we also want to go back to the patron and take that loan ID off. So right now, several of these patrons have these loan IDs. As soon as they return the book, we want to be able to take that off of their record and put it back to null. So those are the 3 different queries at minimum that we need to write. But chances are we're going to need some additional queries because we have some work to do to relate all of this information and look some things up in order to specify what we need. So we will come in here and go to this one and start writing. So we're just going to start using variables from the get-go because it's going to be useful. And I've now explained how this works, right? So we'll set, I'm going to call this one returned book ID, just to be very clear about what it references. And let's just say, let's look at one of the books that's been checked out. All right, book 5 would be a good place to start. That's one of the ones that's been checked out, right? So we'll do that. That's the only one we really need for sure. The rest we can kind of, if we need to look other things up, we can do them as subqueries. But this one's going to get used a couple of times, so it's worth having a variable for it. All right, so we need to look up the loan ID and store it in a variable. Oh, hold on. Yeah, see, I lied. I totally lied, guys. We do have one more variable we're gonna do. But this one's a little more involved. That's why I put it into a separate section. Okay. I'm gonna call it book loan ID. And then use my parentheses to set this up to where I can do this on multiple lines, just to make it easier to read. So I'm going to say select loan ID. So we're going to go to the loan table and look up which one is the right one, right? Because the loan table is the one that actually has the information that relates the patron with the book. So we're going to go there and look this up. And we'll say from loan. And then we're going to specify where book ID equals the returned book ID that we have specified above, and where the date in is null. Just because we want to make sure that if that book's been checked out multiple times, we're only interested in the loan record where the date in has not yet been recorded, because date in will have values for any previous times that book had been checked out and had a loan record. So it's not enough just to say look for the book ID. You have to think big picture and think about, there might be multiple records for this book from the past. So we'll specify date in as null. That's definitely the right one. This is the one we want. Okay, and I'm not going to put a semicolon there. Okay, so those two conditions will help us identify exactly which loan ID we need. And then when this entire query returns that value, we're storing it in this variable so that we can use that down here. So now we have two variables with the information we need. So they told us that they wanted us to change available to true for the book. That's a pretty easy one. We can just say go to the book table and update it. So update book, set available, and then to 1, because we want to set it to true, and then say where the book ID is equal to the returned book ID that we specified. So that's a pretty easy lookup, or rather, it's an easy manipulation. We're just going to go to the table, set a value based on a single piece of criteria for that record. And then here, this is where we want to actually update the record in the loan table. And we have the correct loan ID now to be able to do that. And then we're just going to set that date. So we'll say update loan, and then set date in to be current date. Oops. And then where the loan ID equals at book loan ID. All right. So there we go. So we should have it's very simple now that we've already looked it up, because the other way that we could have done this is to take everything in the parentheses here and just, put that here instead of the variable, right? And that would be perfectly valid. But it turns out we're going to need to use this more than once. So I thought it was worthwhile putting it in a variable. All right. So the patron actually, updating this record is going to mean we need one more way to look things up, because we know about which loan record we were looking at, but we don't know what the patron ID was. And you think about this is actually like a pretty good real life example. You go to the library, if any of you guys go to the library anymore, you go to the library to drop off the book that you did, and you either put it in a book drop, if it's like after hours or like a drive-through book drop, or you walk in and you set it on the counter, and you don't necessarily get in line and hand it to somebody and say, my name is such and such, here's my card, I would like to return this book. That's not usually how it works. You just you hand it in, and they grab the book whenever they get around to it, and they check it back in. So that means the only piece of information they have is the book ID. So you have to have a way in the system to look up the patron and look up that loan record, right? to make sure that their record is updated. So we are writing that code right now. We're going to update the patron table. We're going to go and find the loan ID for this patron and set it to null. But we have to find, which patron is it, right? And I did not make this one a variable because we're not going to use it again. We're just going to, so I'll just do it in place right here. And we're just going to say, okay, let's go look up what patron it is. So we're going to select the patron ID from the loan table where we have the loan ID, because we can just look it up using the one we already stored as the correct one for this. And that'll take care of it. So let's run all of this. We're going to, this entire script now has 5 queries, 2 to set variables and, do a little bit of work here, and then 3 to actually take care of updating the book, loan, and patron tables with the new information. All right. All right, so we have a failure here on update patron. And it says, let's look at the error code. You're using safe update mode and you tried to update a table without aware that uses a key column. Oh, of course I did. Yeah. Okay, so something that I was not counting on is that it's going to, in safe mode, it's not going to allow us to do a subquery to set this as a key. So what we are going to need to do, we actually are going to need to set a variable for this. So I'm actually going to come up here where we're looking things up, and I'm going to add a little section that says, look up the patron ID and store in a variable. So here, I'm just going to take this, and we'll just say set, and we'll call it returning patron ID. And just do this lookup here, like so. Just like we did above, where we're going to do this subquery to return that value, store it in here, and then we can use it directly right here, just like we did with book loan ID here, to specify that, and that value will have already been stored. And so then when MySQL Workbench is running this and saying, oh, but you're in safe mode, the value is already there. So it's going to recognize this as being a straightforward lookup. Okay, so right now, I may need to, I'm going to copy this real quick and put it right here, because I don't want to run these 2 again, but I do need to run these. So let's do this. Okay, so now, and then I can get rid of this, just for the sake of making sure. So ordinarily, when everything's working, you can run the entire script, and you should run the entire script together, including this, all at once. I just needed to fix that so that that loan actually is updated properly. Yeah. So yeah, so now we have a couple instances here, because I actually did it with a different patron ID the second time. That allowed us to check that back in. Okay, so now if I wanted to choose another one, so let's go see, pick another one. How about this one? So this one has a book ID of 1. Let's check that one back in and watch, everything being updated the way that it's supposed to be. So all I need to do is change this in a single place. Everything else is going to be looked up following that. So let's just run this entire thing. And we have green checks all the way down. So we can check book and refresh this, and you can see that book 1 is now available. We can check the loan table and refresh that. We can see that loan ID 4 with patron ID 22 now shows a date N for book 1. And if we go over to the patron table and look at 22, Let me refresh that. We can see that 22 no longer has a loan ID that's been set to null. So our script worked, and we can now, run this script with the correct book ID and patron ID to check a book out. We can run this whole script with the correct book ID to check everything back in, and everything gets updated where it's supposed to in the multiple tables. All right. So the last basic query here is just to return the names of the patrons with the genre of every book they currently have set out. Now, I said basic. What I meant was it's actually going to be complex, but it's I meant it's the last thing before the bonus mission. So let's think about this for a second. As always, think about what you need to get, and then also think about what information you are going to use to get it. We want the names of the patrons with the genres of the books that are currently checked out. If the only way for us to know if things are currently checked out is to look and see, which ones actually have loan IDs, but then we have to actually go to the loan table to access what the book ID is. And then from there, we're going to have to go to the genre, get the genre ID and go to the genre table to look up that name. So we're going to be crossing 4 different tables and connecting them all to get all this information. That means we need multiple joins. So it's basically just adding, one filter right after another and narrowing it down and narrowing it down. So let's start with the first select. We're just going to say, okay, we want the first name and the last name of the patron, right? So definitely from the patron table. And then ultimately, we're going to be getting the genre, type from the genre table. So we'll start with patron. That's where we want to begin. And then just go the other direction. So inner join, and first we'll go to loan because patron has a loan ID. So we can actually go to the loan table from here using that and saying patron.loan ID equals loan.loan ID. So that's our first connection. The next connection is going to be, what else in the loan table will help us get to that genre? Well, that's going to be the book ID, right? So we're going to inner join on book on the book ID being equal to the loan book ID. And then we need to get to that genre ID. So we're going to say join with genre on book.genre ID equals genre.genre ID. Okay. So that helps us get all the way from the patron table to the genre table so that we can connect first and last names with the genre type. But we also have a condition currently checked out. So we just need to say where the loan.date in is null. We know that it's still checked out if there's no date in on the loan table. Those are the ones that haven't been returned. So that's probably the most straightforward way to determine which ones are currently checked out. All right, let's run it and see what we get. All right, so it says that we have Tasha, Tara, and Sybil with children's, romance, and children's. And okay, and it looks like the patrons that have null for the date in are 17, 42, and 33. So we can go to the patron table and see Tasha and Sybil, and then 33 is Tara. So there we have it. We definitely have returned, the correct information by using that inner join to connect one table after another and get all the way from here to there. Okay, so let's talk about the bonus missions. They want you to return the counts of the books of each genre. They point to this documentation where you can find out how to use the right syntax here for counting and get things to be grouped and all of that. So this is the syntax we're going to be using, is count and group by. Return the counts of the books of each genre. So genre is what we want to group on. So let's start by doing a select, since we're doing a lookup. I say select genre.genres and count from the genre table, but we're going to join with book because let's just do this on the next one. Genre ID is book.genre ID, because if we want to count the number of books, we have to be able to access the book table, right? So that it can look it up. And then it says group by genre. It says we need to actually do it with each genre. And then if we wanted to, go a step further and say, put them in order, we could say order by genre.genres so that they're in alphabetical order. Let's run it. All right. So we have adventure, children's, dystopian. So they're in alphabetical order. And you can see that there's the number of books that exist in each one of those lined out for us in a nice little format. Okay, so that was it. The last one is a reference book cannot leave the library. How would you modify either the reference book table or the book table to make sure that doesn't happen? We want to essentially have some sort of way of telling that, we like some sort of logic, right? So there is actually a way to do an if, then kind of circumstance with this, and you can certainly look up the documentation on this, but I'm just going to go ahead and give it to you straight because we are almost done. I'm going to go the route of updating book and saying we're going to actually this is the approach we want to take. We want to update all of the books in the table, go through, look at them one by one, and look and see if they have the genre that is the one for reference book, which, if you remember, was 25. So we'll just look for that. Is the genre ID 25? And if it is, then make sure that available is changed to 0. Even if it's not checked out. And it shouldn't be checked out. I mean, the idea would be you do this before you let anybody check anything out. So we'll set it to 0, and that means it'll never be available in the future to be checked out. And otherwise, if that's not the genre ID, then we can just let it be whatever it was before. We can just keep it set to that value. So I think that's what we're going to do. And that way we can, and we just want to make sure to have a way to allow it to do it to multiples. Now, it turns out we only have one in here that has that genre ID. But if we had multiples, we could write this query to actually have it update multiple books. So we'll go update the book table. And then I'm going to set the available property that we were just looking at, and use the case keyword to set up an if-else kind of situation. So we'll say when, not where, but when, genre ID equals 25, then we want the value of available to be 0. Otherwise, we just want it to be the value that's already stored and available. And then we just end it. And then we have to qualify and say, because it's not going to let you do an update unless you actually use a key. So we're going to say where the book ID is greater than 0. That will satisfy the need to, get around the safe mode issue of having that primary key be the basis of filtering, but it still allows us, it basically says, go check every single book and do this, but we have a condition. It's not going to just say that none of them are available. It has to be only books that have a genre ID of 25. So let's go look at this one more time. So we've got this book 25 here. It definitely is set right now to 1, which says it's available true, and that's what we want to change. So let's run this query. And it says it went through successfully. So now we can come back over here to our book table and update this and come down here to organic chemistry. And sure enough, it's been set to 0. So we were, but nothing else has, right? Only the other ones that are 0 were already 0. And all the ones that were 1s are still 1s. So our logic worked. And that is one way that you can actually apply a little bit of logic to have values be set conditionally. Okay, this has been extensive, but hopefully instructive. There's a lot of good stuff in here to learn. And if you end up going into more of a back-end type position, you may very well, this might just be the beginning of your SQL journey. All right, thanks for sticking with me, and I will see you in the next one.